Hello and welcome to a very special episode of It Came From the Page. So I am releasing this on November 3rd, and you know what that is? Apparently my parents' wedding anniversary. I didn't know that when I talked to him, but it's also Godzilla's birthday. And I did know that. And then 10 minutes ago when my father called me and was like, "You know what day it is, son?" I was like, "Yeah, it's Godzilla's birthday." He was not happy that I forgot their wedding anniversary. Anyways, no one's here to talk about my family drama. We are here to talk about all Godzilla films. Yes, I've decided to rank all of the Godzilla films from worst to best. And there are 36 films. Soon to be 38 because there is Godzilla Minus One is coming out this year. Literally in December, I'll be able to watch it. And I'm so excited. But also there's another American Godzilla film coming out. Godzilla X Kong New Empire, I believe it's called. I don't know, more monkey nonsense. But I love Godzilla. Out of all of the various fandoms and various things I'm interested in the world, Godzilla is number one. Always number one in my heart. I love the big old green guy. Now, without further ado, let's not get into this too far. We gotta just start this list because it's a long one. So number 36, the only Godzilla film I actually dislike. This is Godzilla the Planet Eater from 2018. This is one of the Godzilla anime trilogy movies that were all released on Netflix in close conjunction back in 2017 and 2018. This one is the one that finishes off the entire anime trilogy. This movie is not very good because it has some very bad messages in it. It's very anti-technology. It's very, there's some like misogynistic stuff in here. It's not a good movie. I do not care for it. I do not like it. I do not like it on a bus. I do not like it on a train. I do not like Godzilla the Planet Eater. Sam I am. 35 is the one people probably thought was going to be at the bottom, but it's definitely, for me, I have some enjoyment of it. It's not a great movie. There's some very bad things that happen in this movie, but I do kind of still have this bad soft spot for it. And this is Godzilla 1998, the Roland Emmerich film. I have emotions towards it that are relatively positive, even though there are some very, very bad things in this movie. I cannot imagine it holds up. There is probably all to do with me enjoying, the upcoming release of this when I was young. I was like 6 years old, waiting for this movie to come out, and I remember the marketing push. I got all the toys, I got all the collectibles, and I didn't like the movie when it first came out, but it's kind of slowly kind of grown on me. It's very, repetitive. It's very much a movie that takes things from other movies. There's a whole scene that it's basically just ripping off Jurassic Park. There are some bad words used here that we don't use anymore. Roland Emmerich is not a nice guy, and there's some mean-spiritedness to this movie, but I don't know, there's still some enjoyable action-y elements. Is it bad? Yes. Do I kind of like it still? Also, yes. Now we're at 34. This is the second Godzilla anime trilogy film. This is Godzilla, City on the Edge of Battle. This one is one that is less problematic, although there are some elements that are like oof to it. But it's also kind of just mostly characters debating about whether or not that they should combine with technology. Not that interesting. Mechagodzilla in this one is a city instead of being like the normal Mechagodzilla, and it's fine. Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle is fine. It's like the most kind of forgettable of the trilogy, I think. But the third one being more memorable because of the badness, I put it at the bottom. So anyways, that's this one. These ones are the ones that I've only actually seen once. The anime trilogy only watched once. Every other version of Godzilla that you will appear on this list, I have seen multiple times, a lot. So it says something that these are the ones that I've just never bothered rewatching. Number 33 is a movie that there's some things to like about it, but there's not a whole lot to, and that is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 from 1993. This is one of the middle Heisei films, which is the second era of Godzilla. So Godzilla, when it started out in 1954 to 1975, that's what we call the Showa era. They kind of rebooted it in the 80s from 1984 to 1995. That's what we call the Heisei era. At the Millennium era, it starts in 1999 and ends in 2004. A bit of a shorter chunk there. And then currently, in the Japanese landscape, we are in the Reiwa era, which starts from 2016 going forward. So, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 is in the middle of the Heisei period. It is a film that is like kind of charming. There is a very cute baby Godzilla in this movie. He's so cute. He's so cute. He's so cute. I'm going to put him on the screen. You'll be like, oh my god, XO hard eyes. He's the cutest. But that's mostly what the movie has going for it. There is some fun action sequences in this. Because the Heisei era was so renowned for beam battles, like most of the freaking thing is like characters like standing across from each other going fire beam, fire beam, fire beam, and like it's not as exciting as earlier Godzilla films where they were wrestling. There is a prolonged scene where two characters fall in love while riding a robot pterodactyl. Gotta give it some props for that. Not a terrible movie, but just kind of meh. Next up is the movie that just precedes this one on the Heisei timeline is Godzilla vs. Mothra from 1992. This movie is mostly ripping off Indiana Jones. The human elements are actually kind of entertaining. There is like a deadbeat dad who's trying to get right with his family and get back to his roots and, be like, I'm a good dad again. And then there is a character called Batra introduced, which is basically an evil Mothra. And at one point, Godzilla does get his shit kicked in by a Ferris wheel. At one point, Batra picks up a Ferris wheel and is like, Wachanga! And it just like whips a Ferris wheel at him. Amazing. That was really good. But for the most part, this film is just fine. Next up, this is one that I bet you people did not expect to be this low at 31, is Destroy All Monsters from 1968. Originally pitched as being a all-out ending for the Godzilla franchise. I just think this movie actually ends up kind of being boring. The human elements especially, not great. And I know certain people who talk about Godzilla on the internet don't understand that having good human elements is just as important as having fun monster bits. You can't just have fun monsters. You gotta have human elements that are interesting and get you invested in the story, and that is where the biggest weakness of Destroy All Monsters comes in. There are some really cool tokusatsu, which is Japanese special effects, which is on display here that I like. And I like seeing all the monsters together. That's really cool. But, it's just a movie that just kind of, other than the cool monster scenes, there's not much else to it. So really you can get everything from this movie by just kind of watching a 30-minute compilation online. That's the only thing about Destroy All Monsters, is I really think the human elements are lacking. Number 30 is a book that is a movie that I do actually like, but I'm not extremely fond of, is Godzilla Raids Again from 1955. This is the direct sequel and follow-up to the original Godzilla film, and it has a lot of kind of cool, fun elements to it. It changes up the settings a little bit. It's all about these plane pilots who originally discover Godzilla, and they're like spotting Godzilla, and like you kind of follow their relationship as they follow Godzilla's path of destruction and how it affects their lives, and I kind of really find that stuff really interesting and heartwarming. There's a cool element in the middle of the film where a whole bunch of escaped criminals get loose because the Godzilla's rampaging, and there's like a fun little subplot like focusing and trying to chase them down, and it kind of like had some cool elements to add into the action. This is the first appearance of Anguirus, or as it depends on when you became associated with the Godzilla franchise. It's because some people call him Anguillus. We're not getting into that right now. But he's cool. I like him. The monster stuff is, though, probably the weakest element of the movie. There's not too much of it. And the actual monster fight is very kind of basic. And, human elements are fun. I just think the monster elements are not as fun. Number 29, I'm amazed it made it this high up. The first entry in the Godzilla anime series, Godzilla Planet of the Monsters. I think this movie has some actual interesting ideas on display, and I think it does introduce a cool element to explore in further movies. There's a very fun surprise ending to this movie, and I like some of the character writing in it, and I find a lot of interesting elements to it. Unfortunately, it's failed by the other two entries in the trilogy. I just think that the trilogy does have a very cool kind of starting out point. Next up at 28, another one people are probably going to get mad at me for having this low is Godzilla King of the Monsters, the 2019 film. I think this film is a beautiful film in terms of special effects. I think it's a god-awful film in terms of the messaging and what it's trying to say in it. And some of the human elements are really lacking, and there's just a lot of very icky stuff about this. I've never been okay with how this movie treats nuclear energy and treats the kind of the core elements that made up the original Godzilla film. So I just think that there is a lot of flaws in this from a film standpoint, but if you're just going in for a special effects spectacle, you can't really go wrong. It is quite fun in that regard. Number 27, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla from 2000s. This is a wacky movie in which they go, how we get rid of Godzilla? Well, and then a science goes, I know how. We fire a black hole at him. It doesn't go well. You shouldn't fire black holes at Godzilla. Bad things are going to happen. Anyways, it opens a pathway to an alternate universe, and then a little bug comes through, and then it turns out that bug creates a giant bug, and the giant bug is like going around. There's some cool like horror-y elements to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. I've just never had much of a connection to, again, the human elements. I think the human elements are fine in this movie, but like a great Godzilla movie, as we go on, you will see it includes great human elements and great monster stuff. The monster stuff in this one is quite fun, and there is some really fun little horror set pieces early on. I just think that, unfortunately, it doesn't nail the landing. Number 26 is Godzilla Final Wars. Back in the day, I loved this movie. When I watch it nowadays, I'm like, I still love this movie, but it's bad. It's bad. It's like a very ridiculous, over-the-top action movie, and it is a lot of fun to watch. I would definitely recommend people watch Godzilla Final Wars, but it's hard to rank extremely highly when it's like 90% people doing bad wire foo, and it's very silly and unhinged, and I like that element about it, but it's kind of like it's hard to talk about in a way that's like, wow, isn't the CGI good? It's not. The CGI really looked bad, and it looked bad then in 2004. And like a whole bunch of the elements are like ripped off of very famous movies. Like the whole ending is very much ripped off of Star Wars. There's like weird stuff in this. It's wild and fun, lots of monster action, but it's not great. Speaking of things that are wild and fun but not great, is my number 25 film, King Kong vs. Godzilla from 1962. I'm sure people are very surprised to have this so low on the list. And the thing is, this movie, in the Japanese cut, is a very funny comedy and is like making fun of the idea almost that there's these two monsters who are battling. It involves this like pharmaceutical company who is like, we need ourselves a new mascot. And they go out, they find King Kong, they bring King Kong back, and they're like, mascot is going to fight Godzilla, and then he's going to be the greatest mascot of all time, and we're going to become millionaires. And it's so goofy of a plot. And I like this movie a lot. I think there's a lot of fun elements to it. It's wild, it's silly. The problem is, the reason why it's here is there is blackface in the beginning, and it's bad. It's very bad. And it's indispensably bad. So I put it at 25 because it's bad. That's bad. Number 24 is Godzilla 2014 by Gareth Edwards. As you'll see here, I mostly rank American Godzilla films a bit lower than the Japanese counterparts. It's just for stylistic purposes. This movie is actually pretty good. I like a lot of the elements where it's kind of baiting and switching you, where it's kind of like, oh, you want to see this happen, but you're not going to get it. And it kind of like withholds the monster duels until the very end. The human elements are pretty boring, though. Bryan Cranston is great in the beginning, and then they kind of put him off to Aaron Taylor Johnson, and he is just not an interesting lead to follow. He's very much a boring military man who's doing military stuff, and it's just not as fun as every other element in the movie. But I do think that Godzilla 2014 is actually a quite good movie. Number 23, Godzilla vs. Megalon. This film is 50 years old this year. This is the 50th anniversary of Godzilla vs. Megalon. Oh my goodness. I love Godzilla vs. Megalon. It is extremely goofy. It is very much in the late period of the first run of Godzilla films when they did not have as big of a budget, but they had a big old heart, my friend. And this is also the film where that infamous Godzilla tail slide comes in. I love the Godzilla tail slide. I'm all for the Godzilla tail slide. This film also introduces the monster Jet Jaguar. And he has a great theme song. It's like Jet Jaguar, Jet Jaguar. He's got a great theme song. Everyone loves Jet Jaguar, and if you don't, you are wrong. So yeah, I love Godzilla vs. Megalon. As you can see, as we are going up throughout the rest of the films on this, I do really like all of these. Like, it's pretty impressive that there are about 25 Godzilla films that I've just absolutely love, and Godzilla vs. Megalon is one of them. Megalon is an awesome villain. I love the Seatopians. Everything about this, it's like a cheese fest to the extreme. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Number 22, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah from 1991. Speaking of cheese fest, this is one of the cheesiest movies I've ever seen, and I love it. It rips off silly things. Most of the movie is very much kind of ripping off Terminator ideas. This is a movie where they go back in time to stop Godzilla from being made. It ends up creating a worse monster. There's time travel shenanigans. There is some pretty interesting human elements to talk about Japanese nationalism here. So there actually is some worthwhile human elements to the movie as well. It is, though, very, very goofy. The plot does not extremely make a whole lot of sense, and I feel like most people who try to explain it like it makes sense have lost their mind at some point. It's very hard to try to write and try to make a timeline that makes this movie actually make a whole lot of sense, but it's a super fun ride, and you just gotta go along with it and enjoy what's going on. There is also a scene when they're going back in time that they go fly over an American ship, and at one point, it looks like a shooting star spaceship, and at one point one of the crew members looks to the other and he goes, "You'll have to tell your son about this, Commander Spielberg." And you're like, so stupid. It's very stupid, but I love it. 21, Shin Godzilla from 2016. This movie, very, very well made. It's a really compelling film. There's a lot of interesting elements to it. There's also a lot more politically questionable things going on in this movie than I've ever been fully comfortable with. It's a film that has some elements of being kind of like a film about bureaucracy in some really funny and interesting ways, but it also has this very right-wing elements to it, and has some Japanese nationalistic elements to it. I'm going to link in the show notes a really great video essay on this film that really kind of made me think about it a little differently by Accented Cinema. So I would definitely recommend watching that one, especially if you're somebody who's like, why did you put Shin Godzilla so low? I think Shin Godzilla is a very well-made film. I really like the film. There are just some political elements that I'm always kind of trying to unpack, and I normally just slot it into the middle because there's just a lot to kind of figure out whether I really like the film or if the messaging makes it a little bit lower. Number 20, this is the highest you're going to get for an American film, and people are going to, again, probably be mad at me for this, but this is Godzilla vs. Kong from 2021. This movie, so stupid, so ridiculous, so over the top, and I love it. It's just silly fun, because I feel like when they try to, when American cinema tries to tell Godzilla stories, there's always some like oof elements, like where it's like this is from the American Hollywood system where there's a whole lot of money put into this, so you're not going to get as much of a cogent political point that a lot of these early and amazing Godzilla films have. So really the best you get when it comes to Hollywood and Godzilla is just having a ball to the wall, silly monster brawl. And I think nothing is better at that than Godzilla vs. Kong. I'm very excited for the next one because, you know, you gotta have a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek fun elements to it, and I really do enjoy it. Next is a movie that I absolutely love. And I feel so conflicted that I have it here, but looking through the list, it belongs here. This is number 19. This is Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. And it's like, what? This is again from the Heisei era. I love Godzilla versus Space Godzilla so much. It is redonkulous. It's silly. Some of the effects look awful, especially when they're flying around in space. Does not look good, and I'm pretty sure there's an actual potato there. Regardless, as an asteroid. But regardless... The action in this movie is super fun. The characters in this movie are super fun. There is a explanation of how a character called Space Godzilla comes to be that is hilarious. It is basically like they have two different interpretations of how Space Godzilla could have come, but they don't actually know which one happened. And it's basically like, yeah, so the Godzilla cells, they went through a black hole, and then when they went through the black hole, they hit a whole bunch of crystals, and then they combined with the crystals to make Space Godzilla. And I'm like, that's stupid. I love it. Give me more. So yeah, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla is super fun. I love it. Number 18, All Monsters Attack, or Godzilla's Revenge, depending on when you watch it and how you watched it, from 1969. This is a film that gets really crapped on by a lot of people, and I've never understood it. I think there is a lot of really amazing elements to this movie. It is all about the latchkey kid generation for Japanese folks. It's all about this generation of kids who their parents have to work, and they are kind of left on their own, and it's really kind of about how those kids, you know, made it through life when they were young, and they're kind of like alone, and they didn't have many friends. And it was a film that, like, as a kid I really attached to and I really loved as a kid. And then you know, there's this whole deeper little element about it, talking about society in Japan for kids at the time. All of the, like, well, not all, most of the monster footage in this is stock footage, which means it's footage from other movies that they put in here. It doesn't bother me overly that much. I just think this film has a lot of heart, and I do like when there's like a kid. It's basically like a kid dreams up, and it's his fantasy world, and he's imagined he's on Monster Island with Godzilla. And as a kid, that was me. I always was imagining that. And then I also love, there's a scene where he talks to Minya, which is baby Godzilla in the Showa era, and he's like, Godzilla says I need to learn to fight my own battles. I always have weird dub lines stuck in my brain forever and always. So, you're welcome. Next up is another movie I loved so much as a kid. Number 17, Godzilla vs. Gigan from 1972. And this is because Gigan is the coolest monster, bro. Gigan is so cool. He's got a bunch of, like, knife hands. He's got, like, a chainsaw for a belly. He's got, like, this cool-looking beak with, like, a metal beak. He's got, like, these, like, laser vision. There's, like... He is so cool. Gigan is so cool. I get so mad when people start calling him a chicken. I don't think he looks like a chicken. Do you think he looks like a chicken? I don't see the resemblance. I don't think he looks like a chicken, okay? Fight me in the comments. Don't. But he's not a chicken. He's a cyborg monster with, like, a bunch of cool-looking, like, hook hands and a chainsaw belly. The movie itself is pretty bad, though. I do love it, though. It's like one of those movies that's like, it's pretty cheesy and silly, but there's a lot of heart to it again, because it's like about, like, the main storyline is this guy who's a manga artist. All these hilarious little sketches and stuff like that. like Mamagon, which like looks exactly like his girlfriend, but anyway, that's a whole nother, that's for a therapist to deal with, not me. But he gets a job from these people who end up being space cockroaches who go like, we need you to help us design Children Land. And so he designs all the specs for it, and they make this like giant like Godzilla tower kind of thing, and they make this whole like little like basically like a Disneyland but for Godzilla. But it turns out they're evil cockroaches. They're trying to take over the world with it. You're like, oh no! And then Godzilla shows up and just like trounces a theme park at the end of the movie. It's awesome. It's awesome. I love Godzilla vs. Gigan. Number 16. Godzilla against Mechagodzilla from 2002. This introduces Mechagodzilla 3 or Kiryu. I really like that design. It's a cool looking design. I just like the design. The movie actually has some really cool human elements. I think the human characters are excellent in this movie, and the action is really cool. It's just a altogether solid Godzilla film. Number 15, The Return of Godzilla from 1984. This was the first film in the Heisei era. I really, really liked it. There is a lot of more serious elements to this movie. There is a lot of stuff to be said and to be dived into about how Japan felt about the Cold War, because a big part of this movie is feeling like you're stuck in between two giant superpowers who are about to destroy the world. And this movie was adapted to a very different in tone movie called Godzilla 1985 by New World Pictures. And when they brought over the movie and they re-edited it, they took out a lot of the nuance of the film. So the 1985 one is still fun to watch, but if you're going to watch this film for the first time, would definitely recommend watching the Japanese version, The Return of Godzilla, because it is a more serious movie. Back in the day, the early part of this movie where they go on the spaceship, well, they go on a ship in the ocean that's like this ghost ship, and they find these like horrified corpses. It ruined my day. It was like Tinder trauma to the extreme. I've never been okay since. Whoa. Number 14, Son of Godzilla from 1967. This is the first Godzilla film I ever saw and destroyed my life forever and made sure I was never cool. Thanks, parents. I was sick one day, and my mom was like, went out to like, I think Zeller's, which is a Canadian store if you've ever been there, and found in the bargain bin a VHS of Son of Godzilla. Put it on. I loved it, and I became a Godzilla freak ever since. So I have a huge fondness for this movie. Also, I just think it's a very fun movie. It's very, very fun. I just love it. There's like, they're doing all these, like, the scientists in the movies are doing all these, like, weather experiments. So there's, like, this really sweet scene about Godzilla and his son in the snow hugging at the end of the movie. It's so sweet. And I like all the creatures in there. There's, like, the creatures on the island. There's, like, a giant praying mantis called Kamakurus. And then there's, like, a giant spider who's, like, Kumonga or Spiga, again, depending on when you got into the franchise. They've had different names. But I just love Kumonga. I think Kumonga is like the best looking practical effects spider ever. Truly. And I think it's like really realized well and really puppeted well. And it has like awesome, like giant practical, like what do you call those things? They're the legs. It's got a giant practical leg that it like goes into like a cave at one point. It looks awesome. I love it. So this is a movie I have a whole bunch of fondness in my heart for, and that is why it's so high on here, really. And I also think it's just a cute movie with a lot of cool things. Number 13, Godzilla Tokyo SOS from 2003. This movie is just like almost all monster fights, and it's awesome. It's awesome. It's like the best Mothra has ever looked, because this is a direct sequel to Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, so you have Kiryu again, and Godzilla is fighting Kiryu, but then there's like, oh no, Mothra's here, and Mothra shows up, and it's like the best Mothra has ever looked. Like, this movie has awesome special effects. I love the way this looks. The monster fight is awesome. I love it so much. There's some fun character bits to hear it as well. I like the characters. The characters and human elements are not as good as the first movie, which actually has some more in-depth characters to it, but I still think they are serviceable and fun. So I have a lot of funness to this movie. It's just a blast from start to finish. Number 12, Godzilla vs. Destroyer from 1995. This is the movie... Why am I doing this? This is the movie that ended the Heisei era, and I think it did a great job. I love it. I love it. It's dark. It's very cataclysmic. Like, you feel like the world is going to end from this movie. It's introduced that Godzilla is, like, melting down, and so he's, like, burning Godzilla, so he has, like, this really cool suit where he's got, like, all these elements where he's, like, burning, and he's, like, in pain, and you're like, oh, poor baby Godzilla, he's in pain, he's got heartburn. But what happens is, if they don't figure, like, the humans don't figure a way to stop Godzilla, or, like, stop him from melting down, he will destroy the Earth by doing a nuclear meltdown that will destroy all of humanity. And it's awesome. So it's really cool because there's this huge stakes for this movie, and it's all these people trying to get together and figure out how do we stop Godzilla. And then you figure out, they talk about one of the elements to kill the Godzilla in the first movie, which is the oxygen destroyer. And they're like, should we bring it back? Should we try to do that again? And you discover, like, their worst fears. When they used it the first time, they created an evil bacteria that ends up in a giant crab monster called Destroyer. It's named after the oxygen destroyer. It's like, whoa. So it's like the thing that, like, the embodiment of the thing that killed the first Godzilla. And he looks like Satan. When he, like, appears in the movie, he literally looks like Satan. He's got, like, these giant wings, and he's just like, whoa. It's like, oh my God, it's Satan. Anyways, it's a beautiful film. Number 11, Invasion of Astro Monster from 1965. I love all of the characters in this movie. The characters are so good. I love them. The monster fights are definitely sidelined. I think there's only like 5, maybe 10 minutes of Godzilla in this movie. But the thing is, all the other elements are really fun and entertaining. It's just a really good 60s sci-fi film. If you like that era of sci-fi, you will definitely enjoy this film. There's a cool romance angle to it, and yeah, it's just, there's a lot of heart to it, and I really, really like it. Number 10 is a book that is unhinged, is a movie that's unhinged to the extreme. This is Godzilla vs. Ghidorah from 1971. This movie is weird. This movie is weird and wild, and it is so much fun. But it is a film that is like basically Godzilla fights pollution. Ghidorah is this monster from space who comes to Earth because of all the pollution, and then he starts eating all the pollution and he becomes a giant smog monster. So then he starts rampaging through Tokyo and Japan, and he's like basically like, oh bitch, don't do smog. Anyways, it's an anti-pollution movie, but it's also like a psychedelic movie because at one point, a character does drugs and watches a person dance in fish head costumes for like probably 5 minutes. Then there's a scene where randomly it becomes animated briefly. There is a scene where Godzilla flies. Yeah, that happens. Yeah, it's just wild from start to finish. If there's ever a movie that I'm one day going to try to convince Kelsey from Slime and Slash to do a drunk commentary with me, it would be this movie. I think she would love it. Number 9, Ibra, Horror of the Deep. Ibra is a giant space shrimp. Well, he's not from space. We don't really know. He's just kind of there. This is another one of those island movies. This movie was originally written to star King Kong, and then they like showed the rights holders, and they're like, well, we don't like it. So then they're like, well, fuck you, we're going to put Godzilla in it. So as such, Godzilla is very weird in this movie. He's woken up by lightning. He very much like is a more physical creature here. He like falls in love with a woman. Like all the King Kong tropes are like here, but for Godzilla. And it's funny because like Ibra is also like is very much more like a King Kong level villain because he's just a giant shrimp, and he's got like these awesome like I think he's a lobster. To be fair, Ibra is a lobster. He's not a shrimp, but he's got these giant claws. And at one point, him and Godzilla are basically like throwing like a boulder back, and they're basically like playing volleyball for like 5-10 minutes. It's great. He's like whoop-bam! He like Ibra like serves the thing, and then Godzilla counter serves. Anyways, it's beautiful. It's silly to the extreme, but I have a great time with it always. And also, like, there's some awesome effects in this. The effects in general, like, really hold up. Like, there's this awesome scene where, like, so it takes place on an island, and these, like, evil guys called the Red Bamboo have, like, figured out a chemical so that they can control Ibra, so that Ibra does their bidding. So, like, people try to, they like, enslave people, and, like, they try to escape the island at one point, and then Ibra like shows up out of the water, and then he's got one big claw, but this other claw is kind of little, and it just like stabs the people and throws them in his mouth, so he like eats people, and it looks awesome. Anyways, I'm starting to sound like I'm like 8 years old again. Number 8 is Godzilla 2000 from 1999. One of the only Japanese Godzilla films I've seen in the theater. I absolutely loved it. It is so good. It is so good. It's like, it's very silly, but is also like well made and fun and exciting. And this was clearly made as a response to the Godzilla 1998 film, and you can tell because it feels like there's a lot more love and heart put into it. There's the human elements are just really sweet. There is like this father who basically is part of like he's like, instead of storm watching, it's like Godzilla watching. So he like goes and does all these studies of Godzilla. So it's basically like Twister, but the Twister is Godzilla, and they're like following it around, and there's like he and his daughter are like going through, and it's just very sweet. And then there's a reporter who's like joining up with them to try to figure out like what's the deal with these guys who are like storm tracking Godzilla, and it's awesome. And then Orga, who's like the big villain of this, he's pretty cool. He's got like these big old monkey. He looks kind of like a big old monkey man, but he's got like these big old like teeth, and he's very physical. Anyways, this film got a lot of heart to it. And also the action is awesome. All the monster stuff is great. And yeah, I absolutely love Godzilla 2000. It's a whole close to my heart. Number 7, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla from 1974. This has the coolest design for Mechagodzilla. It has one of the coolest scenes ever, in which there's one, so Godzilla has to team up with this other monster called King Caesar, and to do that someone has to do a musical number to awaken King Caesar. It's pretty great. But regardless about the musical number, at one point they're both coming to fight Mechagodzilla. So Mechagodzilla has to fight him on like 2 fronts. So what he does is he like puts his like foot up, and like he has like part of his like body facing this way, and then his head turns around and he starts shooting lasers the other way. So he's like doing like both sides of it, just like complete like huge rocket barrages, and it's like yes, this is beautiful. And then also the human elements, super fun in this. It's very spy heavy. It feels a lot like a spy movie, and yeah, it is a hoot. And the main monsters, the main evil aliens in this one are Monkey Mans. So I'm all for the Monkey Mans. Number 6, Ghidorah, the 3-headed monster. King Ghidorah is one of Godzilla's most famous foes, and this is his first appearance. And it's awesome. It's awesome. And this movie is really one of those first big team-up movies, because Godzilla was made on its own with Godzilla Raids Again, and then King Kong vs. Godzilla. But Toho, the company that made Godzilla, also made 2 other monster movies that were not connected to Godzilla until this movie. So they made Rodan, and they made Mothra. And this is the movie where Rodan and Mothra team up with Godzilla to fight a bigger threat, and that is King Ghidorah. And he is awesome. There is this amazing scene where all of the monsters talk to each other, and like they have to get translated. Someone is like translating Godzilla and like Rodan and Mothra having a talk about like, you have to save the humans. Like, come on, dude, come on. And like Godzilla's like, why would we save the humans? They're terrible to us. And then Rodan's like, yeah, they're awful. And then they're having like this whole big monster debate. And at one point, the person doing the translate is like, oh, Godzilla, what terrible language. So it's like, I like to think Godzilla's like, bitch, I ain't doing that. I ain't gonna help these people. I'm gonna hang out with my friends. I don't care about this. But eventually Mothra goes like, screw you guys, I'm gonna go fight him myself then. And then Mothra is getting destroyed by King Ghidorah, and they're like, oh, we feel bad now. So then they go help, and they have like a giant battle. And then the main human plot is like, there's this famous princess who like it survives an assassination attempt because she's been possessed by an alien from Venus. And the idea is, I think it's Venus. It might be Mars. It's one of those two. But at one point, she is basically like, the alien has come to warn them about King Ghidorah. So she's like possessed, and she's like, you guys must stop King Ghidorah. We must stop. She's going to come and kill you all. It's very fun. It's very fun. I love it. I love it. Number 5, Mothra versus Godzilla. This is when Godzilla and Mothra first battle. I guess I misconstrued. So, yeah, clearly I was wrong when I said that Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, was the first time that they were all together. This is the first time Godzilla and Mothra exist. They was like, literally, they were both from 1964, so I got the thing picked up. But yeah, this is another classic Godzilla film and has a lot of really in-depth character elements to it. Actually has some pretty strong messages about greed, and yeah, it's just a very fun Godzilla movie. This is my favorite Godzilla design ever. Like, I love the way that Godzilla looks in this movie. He is very clumsy in this movie, which I love, where he's just kind of like walking through the city and he accidentally like steps on like an underground mall. He ends up like getting his tail stuck in like a big old like huge power lines, and it's just like very funny that he's like just like a clumsy dude who's like, whoa, he like stumbles and like walks into buildings and stuff. It's great. I love clumsy Godzilla. This is probably the last time in the Showa era when Godzilla was a true blue villain. He is still a baddie in this one, and Mothra is the hero coming to stop Godzilla. And yeah, I really like it. It's very fun and enjoyable. Number 4, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, giant monsters all out attack. This is a great one. This is from the Millennium era, and yeah, obviously I like it when Godzilla and Mothra team up, because yeah, that's the same as this. But in this one, actually, it's not a team up. Godzilla is the villain, and Godzilla's evil in this movie. And all these other monsters have to like come to like try to stop them, and it's awesome. Godzilla's so evil in this movie and mean. He looks very scary. I'll put a picture of how he looks in this movie. He's very scary. This movie has a lot of really great character writing to it. There's a lot of depth to it as well. Obviously not enough time to get into this because we've been going on for a long time. Just know it is well thought out and a cool plot. And the monsters like Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Baragon, who doesn't make the title, rude, right? Where's this? Rude. Baragon's in the movie too. Why don't you put him in the title? But regardless, poor Baragon. But he is. They're all like the guardian monsters. They're all like supposed to be from like Japanese folklore who like come and like help to stop Godzilla. So, yeah, pretty great. Number 3, Terror of Mechagodzilla. This is the sequel to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla from 1974, and this is the final Godzilla film in the Showa era. I love it. It's so good. It's so good. There's also a lot of really great character writing in this. There's a great central romance in the humans where like one of the ladies turned to a cyborg and the other guy's like, but I love you, Katsura. And he's like, Katsura, no. And she's like, I cannot do this. I am a cyborg. I cannot love you. It's beautiful. It's much better than what I just did there. It's beautiful. I love it. It's a great romance. And why I'm only in love with cyborgs. There's also, it introduces a cool villain called Titanosaurus, and Titanosaurus has this like cool thing where it's like, Wah! I don't know, I love Titanosaurus. There's a lot of cool action in this. The human elements are tied together well, and there's also like Dr. Mifune, who's like this amazing evil Japanese villain. He's awesome. He's like this mad scientist, and I love him. He has like such an awesome design, and he's like so deliciously evil. The Monkey Men's back. So it's like the Monkey Men's getting help from a human mad scientist. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Beautiful. Number 2, Godzilla vs. Biollante. I love this movie so much. This has such awesome horror atmosphere. It is a effects extravaganza, and I just absolutely adore Godzilla vs. Biollante. One of my favorites. I just love it. I don't want to say too much about it other than it's beautiful and perfect, and I love it. Number 1, surprising no one, is Godzilla, the original from 1954, and actually a truly beautiful film about the horrors of nuclear war. And there's a lot of heart to it. It's beautifully directed. It's beautifully edited. There's a beautiful soundtrack to it. A lot of moments that will actually hit you really hard and make you cry. It is just a truly, truly great film. And it's something that is easy to lose track of with all of the very fun, silly sci-fi that comes afterwards. The original Godzilla is a very, very serious film and is worthy of all the accolades it can get. It's one of the, if not the greatest monster movie of all time. So the original Godzilla is and will always be my number one. What are your favorites? Have you seen any of these? Do you like me ranking movie franchises? I'll do more. Whatever. Hope you have a good day. Oh, I need to catch my breath.